How many of you in here believe in God and would say that you have a true personal relationship with him? Okay. All of you raised your hands, but if this question was asked to you in front of your non-Christian peers, would your answer still be the same? Okay. I know when I was in high school, and if we were in class, if someone comes in and I was like, so do anyone believe in God, you know? I'd be in the back kind of like, okay, I really hope no one sees me put my hand up, or I'll go, that's me. Because I was like ashamed of what my friends next to me would have thought, and I just didn't want anyone to know that like I said I was a Christian. But like if I went to church, and you know the youth pastor or someone asked that question, I would have been one of the first ones with my hand up, because I said I was a Christian, I went to church, and that was the good Christian answer. Now on Mark 8:34-38 says, then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, if anyone will come after me, he must deny himself, take up the cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for a man to gain the whole world, yet forfeit his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in his Father's glories with the holy angels. Okay, I have heard this verse several times, and when I read it, you know, I realized that Jesus said, if anyone will come after me, he must deny himself and take up the cross and follow me. Like, what does that even mean? Like, I had no clue when I've heard this verse from, like, people telling me, going to church my entire life, going to college, Bible colleges, like, I've heard this, and I've never understood what it meant. And a couple of weeks ago, when I was in New York, I went to my old youth group, and then after I went out with some folks, and I started talking to one of them, and, you know, first it was a casual conversation, you know, how's Washington, how's school, but then it got to, like, you know, how is your relationship with God, like, how's your walk with God, and I started explaining that at times, like, for months on end, I could wake up in the morning and I'm like, you know what, I really want to seek God, I really want to read the Bible, I really want to pray, I really want to be in church, I really want everything I do to represent God. But then there's other times where I was just like, you know what, my friends just invited me someplace, this party or doing random things. I'm like, all right, you know, go to church tomorrow morning or go hang out with my friends tonight and stay up till about 4 o'clock. Let me think, and I always choose hanging out with my friends because I had those selfish desires and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And my one foot was in church and then one foot was like in the world, and I couldn't make a choice. But then like, she told me, you know, like, I need to ask God for that desire again. Like, I need to just sit down and really talk to God. And all weekend, since when I was in New York, all weekend I kept thinking about what she said to me, and then when I got back to Washington, I just kept thinking about it and thinking about it. And finally one morning, I woke up and I was like, I really need to get into the Word. And I started reading the Bible, and I happened to open to Mark 8, and I just read it through it, going through it, and then I got to like Mark 34-38, and for some reason I stopped, and I went back to 34 and I read it again, and I kept reading it over and over again, and then finally for the first time, I understood what Jesus meant when he said, if anyone will come after me, he must deny himself and take up the cross and follow me. When Jesus said, you know, Jesus said that statement, to deny oneself, it means to put aside all our own selfish desires. We need to start making those deliberate choices to follow Christ, no matter what the cost may be, and no matter what we want. Because we hold on to our own selfish needs and wants, we begin to worry way too much about what the world wants and thinks of us, and less about what God thinks. Like, we feel as if we need to fit into this world, but as Christians, we are meant not to fit in. We are meant to be the ones that are different and that are willing to do anything it takes to follow Christ. So are you just going to be someone who is hanging out in the crowd, or are you going to be one of the disciples? Romans 8:13 says, for if you live according to the sinful nature, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live. Our sinful nature primarily consists of our own desires and our own selfish reasons. To put to death the misdeeds of the body Like, sin is always trying to make its way back into our lives, and that, like, it's through our friends, through jobs, through families, through things that we just like to do. And I know personally that I still wanted to keep my friends that I knew clearly that were pulling away from God and pulling away from the plans that He had for me. And I thought like I was strong enough to say no because I thought I was strong enough to say no because I tried to do it on my own, and because I did not put to death those misdeeds that just kept coming back up, and I just kept falling back into those things that I clearly knew I wasn't supposed to be doing. When we put to death our misdeeds, we have to rely on God to resist selfish desires and our sinful nature. If we fail to put to death these misdeeds, it leads to a spiritual death. When we first become Christians, like we are born again, like we give our lives to God, and like the old is gone. But if we continue to persistently refuse to follow God and continue with our own selfish desires and sinful nature, we will encounter spiritual death. As Christians, we must continue to decide whether we will surrender to sinful desires or to the demands of God's nature and character. Like I said before, are you going to be someone who is hanging out in the crowd, or are you going to be one of the disciples? On Galatians 2:20, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave Himself for me. I really like this verse because like it shows a personal connection with Christ. Like it shows that when we have true faith in Christ, we need to consider ourselves one with Him. We need to consider ourselves part of what He is doing. And like I said, our old is gone and our new has come. And when we deny ourselves, it doesn't mean just to deny, like things like our own selfish and means and desires. To deny ourselves means to like also resist sinful nature, but it also means to give God control and having Him put within our lives. It means to replace ungodly desires with godly ones. You have to be able to say, God, here I am yours, do what you want. I want my life to represent you. I have one more story. On April 20th, 1999, in a town called Littleton, Colorado, at Columbine High School, there was events that drastically changed that town, that state, and overall the country. 2 students by the name of Eric and Dylan came into the school shooting, and the result killed many people. Now, after about a year after all this events happened, books started to come out about some of the people that died that day. And I remember when I was in 9th grade, 2 of the books came out, and I remember reading Rachel's Tears, and it was by Rachel Scott's mom. And it was primarily about Rachel's diary entries throughout the last few years of her life, and her mom just put it all together as one book. And towards the end of the book, it was more about accounts that people told her mom about the last last days of Rachel's life. And for Rachel, on that April 20th was like any normal day. She woke up, she did her normal routine, said bye to her mom, and went to school. She got to school, met with her friends, and it was just same like yesterday, the day before. And about lunchtime, she went to lunch. Still, nothing changed. And everyone in school knew she was a Christian and knew she believed in God. And around lunchtime, that's when Eric and Dylan were already in the school, just shooting people. And outside, she was outside with her friend eating lunch. And at that time, Eric and Dylan came out. And like I said, they knew that she was a Christian. They came up to her and asked her, "Do you believe in God?"